The Great Famine of 1845 to 1849 had a devastating effect on the Irish population. During the years of the famine, over 1 million people died from hunger and disease, and a further 1.25 million emigrated to America and Europe. Many emigrants died during the journey, and the ships became known as coffin ships. Maggie is an 11-year-old girl from County Clare, who, with the help of her schoolmaster, Mr. Mulcahy, writes to Eileen, the Canadian cousin she has never met. Dear Eileen, thank you for your very interesting letter on Canadian life. Mr. Mulcahy, my schoolmaster, collected your letter from the post office today and gave it to me to read secretly. As you know, I am a Catholic, and according to English law, this means that I am not allowed to read and write, but Mr. Mulcahy helps me. How are Uncle John and Aunt Julia? I will share with you some upsetting news that I heard last month. Our neighbour, Mr. Murphy, told us that a blight has affected the potato in Europe, and it has now spread to Ireland. This is awful. We have only one field, and we use it to grow potatoes. If they are affected by the blight, we will go hungry, for they are all that we have to eat. We do not have money to buy any other food, because the rent of our cabin is very expensive. Daddy has to pay Lord Ross £2 a year. This summer we were so poor that Daddy had to travel all the way to Meath to work on a big farm just to pay our taxes. While he was away, Mommy and I worked hard around the farm, and in the evenings we worked in the bog. Sometimes we carried the heavy baskets of turf home on our backs. Dear Eileen, I am very sorry for not answering your last 2 letters, but so much has happened since I wrote to you last year that I am sure you will forgive me. Most of our potato crop turned black and rotted, so now Daddy works on one of the bigger farms and earns enough money to buy us Peel's brimstone. It is a bright yellow Indian corn, and it tastes terrible and makes me throw up, but it is better than nothing at all. We had to kill our 2 chickens, and we sold our pig last week to pay the rent on our cottage. Mommy and I planted another crop of potatoes, and I pray to God we will have a good harvest. Daddy went out poaching in Lord Ross's land last night. He caught a trout, and we had a feast. Lord Ross has a warehouse full of grain that he exports to England, and 2 months ago my brother was caught stealing from it. Jimmy tried to explain that his wife and little girl Noreen were starving, but the judge did not care, and Jimmy was transported to Australia. Dear Eileen, please say thank you to Uncle John for the £1 he sent over last November. It helped pay our rent for the first half of this year. We have suffered so much since August. Last summer was so wet, and it rained almost every day, and I think that it helped ruin the potato crop again. Mommy, Daddy and I are so thin and so cold. This is the coldest winter ever. The snow is 6 inches thick, and our worn-out clothes don't protect us at all. Mr. Mulcahy had to close down our hedge school because all of the children are too sick and too weak to attend class. Many of my school friends have died. Last week I went to visit Mr. Murphy and his family and brought them soup that I had collected from the Quaker's soup kitchen. When I opened my neighbour's door, a terrible sight met my eyes. The whole family were huddled together in one corner, dead. They had died of the fever. Lord Ross's sheriff arrived and asked my father to bury the family, but Daddy said no, because it is very easy to catch the fever from a dead body. Mommy felt sorry for the family and sewed some shrouds for the bodies and then helped dress them. The sheriff then knocked the house down on them. Dear Eileen, first of all, I want to say thank you to you and your family for sending us the passage fare to Canada. It is very nice of Uncle John to let us stay with your family when we arrive there. Alas, Mommy will not be travelling with us, for she died a few days ago. Let me tell you what happened. We could not afford to pay the rent on our cabin for the second half of the year, so Lord Ross sent his bailiffs to evict us. Mommy was so sick with the fever that they did not care. They dragged her outside and threw her to the ground. Then they knocked down our lovely little home. Daddy was very angry, but could do nothing. He made a tiny hut at the roadside using some branches, and we all huddled together to try and keep warm. When I awoke the next morning, Mommy was very still and white beside me. I felt her hand, and it was cold and hard. I knew then my mother was dead. Daddy held her in his arms and cried and cried. Later on, he carried her to her favourite tree and buried her beside it. She was so looking forward to travelling on one of those fancy ships, but she never got the chance. This is all Lord Ross's fault. Dear Mr. Mulcahy, I hope you are alive and well. I promised that I would write and tell you about my voyage to Canada aboard the Geraldine, so here it is. Our ship set sail early on the morning of the 27th of July from Cove. The ship was very crowded, with over 500 people aboard. When we first hit a wave, the ship creaked and leaned to one side. I was very scared and thought we were going to drown. During the day, we were all allowed on deck, but at night, or when there was a storm, we had to remain below in the hold. It was horrible. Many were sick with fever, and the smell was disgusting. Over 120 people died during the voyage and had to be thrown overboard. Our only food for the day was water and some stale dry biscuits. The water tasted funny and gave lots of people tummy aches. Daddy was very ill on the journey over, and I am sure he would have died if it had not been for the advice of a kind, awfully woman who told me to take him up on deck for fresh air, as the air in the hold would surely kill him. She was right. I saved my daily ration of biscuits and made Daddy eat them to keep him strong. We arrived in Quebec in September, and before we could leave the ship, we had to be examined by the Canadian doctors. Uncle John was shocked when he saw how thin we were. He felt very guilty for not sending us money earlier. We now live on a big farm with Uncle John. He and Daddy work on it together. I go to the same school as Eileen, and the teachers say I am very good at reading and writing. I told them it was because I had an excellent teacher in Ireland. Life is good here, but it would be perfect if Mommy, Jimmy, Mary, and baby Noreen could be here too. Thank you, Mr. Mulcahy, for all the help you have given me over the years. I will say prayers for you and for Ireland's recovery. Your faithful student, Maggie O'Neill.